So many podcasters think that podcast growth comes down to spending more time on their show, or promoting their show more, or creating more great content, or putting more great content out for their listeners. But if your show isn't built from the jump to attract and keep the right listeners, then more episodes, more ads, or more guest spots on other podcasts isn't going to fix it. And in this episode, I've got Alban Brooke, the head of marketing at Buzzsprout, joining me to bust the biggest myths about podcast growth out there and explain the real reason why most podcast marketing advice simply doesn't work and what you need instead. So if you are tired of throwing time and money at a podcast that just isn't gaining traction and you want to pinpoint exactly what's holding it back, this one's for you. Welcome to Insider Secrets to a Top 100 podcast. I'm your host, Courtney Elmer. Let's make your business binge-worthy. Alban, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me.
I am stoked that you are here. I mean, for those that don't know, you have been head of marketing at Buzzsprout. You've been working with Buzzsprout since 2014. I'm actually really curious, just to jump in with you right here. If we were to rewind to 2014 to now, which is like 100 years in internet years, what has changed and what hasn't changed when it comes to podcast marketing?
Well, what's changed is we've got all sorts of new platforms. In 2014, the really big thing probably was like Twitter. And there was Meerkat and Periscope, and there were all these like people trying to live stream video. We saw Clubhouse. We had this whole social audio movement. Lots of things came and went. We now see a lot more in like vertical video. It's totally new format. But I love looking at what is the same. I recently was doing some research on the history of podcasting, and I ran across this old press release from 2005 when Apple added iTunes. They went to iTunes, they added podcast to iTunes. 2 days after they added podcasting to iTunes, 2 million people had signed up and subscribed to a podcast in the first 2 days. Massive, massive numbers. And I read the press release. I was like, oh, it's so cool how quick this happened. And then I thought, somebody saw this press release. I know this for a fact. Somebody saw this press release and went, oh, I blew it. That was my chance. I missed podcasting's wave. And when I started in 2014, there were people who I remember somebody telling me, oh, I'd love to start a podcast, but it's way too crowded now. And in 2014, this was the first day I worked here. Somebody told me it's too crowded now. And every few years, I hear somebody new say, if only I'd started a few years ago, it would have been worth it. But now starting doesn't really make sense. So one of the most consistent things is we all wish that we were already further along in our journey, and we really underestimate the potential and the value of starting something now.
Man, so true. And I think the way that you flip that, and actually it's not that we all wish we would have started sooner, but it's also that, it's the growth piece of that, which to me is an indicator that what a lot of podcast hosts are doing is equating time with growth. Mm-hmm. And I mean, I was reading from Stephen Bartlett recently. He put a post out about when he hit 1 billion downloads. And he said over 50% of that growth came within the last year. And he's been doing this for 7 years.
Well, I think that you are going to see consistent growth. The growth is not going to be numbers growth. The first episode, the growth you're going to get is figuring out how to plug in the microphone growth. And then episode 2, we're going to start getting stuff like, oh, I realize how often I use filler words, and I'm going to try to cut out some of my ums. And a few weeks in, few episodes, you're going to learn more about what it looks like to structure an episode well. And then we're going to learn things about interviews. And it's going to take years of compounding improvements on the host side, on the storytelling side, on the prep side, on the editing side, on the promotion side. And then we're like, hey, I grew from 5 listeners, which were all personal friends and family, to 35 listeners, to now a couple hundred. And yeah, like Stephen said, half of the growth happened in the 7th year. That's not surprising to me at all, because the numbers growth is all happening at the end. But all of that other growth happened really early on. I love convincing people to go listen to the very first episode of their favorite podcast. I think I got this idea first from Pat Flynn. He played his first podcast recording live on stage once, and it hurt to listen to. It was bad. And I think of him as like one of the most professional podcasters And you kind of imagine he probably just started good. He was good at it from the first day. And it's so healthy for podcasters to see even the people you look up to were bad on day one. And there's no reason they would have been good on day one. We're all going to start out as beginners and get better. So I love this idea of we're going to see growth, but the growth will not always show up in the numbers in the beginning.
Yes. And I think breaking it out into that qualitative growth, which is the stuff that like you're describing, it's the growth in you as the host, in mastering your craft of hosting a show that actually will translate into the quantitative growth that we can see in numbers, but that's going to come later. That's not going to come right away. And we can set those expectations going into it. It can help us stay in the game longer. I'm curious too, Alban, though, for, being at Buzzsprout as long as you have been, and in working with the hundreds of thousands of podcasters that you guys work with, what do you see some of the top podcasters on the platform doing differently when it comes to their shows compared to those who are maybe struggling to grow right now? Is there anything that stands out to you there that you're like, oh, they're definitely doing this differently and more people need to be doing this?
There is like this mindset that some people have, and I'm trying to develop more of this in myself, that they just do stuff. And they seem unashamed by their first efforts. They're the people who they go jump on the dance floor first at the wedding and they don't have great moves, but like they get everybody else started. They're the people that are willing to sing in public, even if they're off key, and they jump in and they write a blog and they start their email newsletter and they just start podcasting and they just go for it. And they skip the whole phase of what if I'm not good enough? And I sat in that stage for a long time. I worked at a podcasting company. I taught podcasting. I was not a podcaster for the first 2 years of it. And I was ranking on Google for all of these things about how to podcast, but I wasn't doing it because I did not like the way my voice sounded. I had particular people in mind. I was like, oh, if I share this on Facebook, they're going to roll their eyes and think, what's Alban doing now? He thinks he's so special. He's doing a podcast. Like, what a joke. And I had all these ideas, and they really were just my own discomfort with, I'm going to be bad at the beginning. And so the people I see succeed seem to skip that. It's not that they don't feel the imposter syndrome or the like nervousness. It's just that they don't let that become the whole thing. And they just dive in. They just grab the first mic. They don't worry about if it's the perfect setup forever. And they start recording. They get something out. They get some feedback. They get another one out and they keep going. There are people that I've met who over the course of years, we've talked about their podcast. And each year they're re-editing old recordings. They're preparing even more. And 3 years in, have not released anything. And there's other people you meet once, and then the next time you see them a year later at Podcast Movement, they've got 130 episodes out because the only way they know how to work is at 100 miles an hour, full speed. And I think you're going to find out pretty quickly if you release 10 episodes in the first 3 months, you're going to know, is this something I like doing or not? Rather than more of what I did. Wait multiple years, come up with a long plan, really think through it. And then on episode 1, get hit in the face with how uncomfortable it was to hear my own voice stammering through an answer.
Yes. I had my first episode scripted like word for word. And I mean, to go back, I always say this. I'm like, every podcast host has a first episode that they regret. There's a first episode out there that we all want to take down. Where I'm curious, and what this brings up for me is, I know you work with a ton of podcasters who are starting for the first time, as do we. And there is so much truth in what you're saying to just kind of doing it messy in the sense that we don't have to have it all perfect and we're not going to be perfect in starting. And yet I think there's also some truth in slowing down to go fast, particularly when it comes to launching a podcast. Do you think that the tendency to just want to jump in and do it for those that are just going to go in and figure it out, do you think there's any advantage to at least get some strategy in place for your show from the beginning so that it can succeed?
So I would say let's get started on like the plan of actually let's record some stuff. Let's edit some stuff. Let's see how it works. Lots of podcasts that I hear for the first time that are really good, they will often say, we've recorded 5 of these already. but we didn't release those. That was practice. And we got a lot better during that time. Now we know, okay, here's what cadence we can commit to. Here's what it looks like to prep an episode. We figured out we didn't like the editing, so we outsourced that to an editor. So we know what it looks like to work with an editor. They solved that over a series of iterations. And they were okay with like letting those episodes go. And those might have just been, the two of them chatting. But they got a lot better. What I don't like is this planning as procrastination, or it's procrastination that's pretending to be planning. And it's where you go, okay, the only way I'm really going to be comfortable with a podcast is if it kind of sounds like how good of a podcast I like listening to, NPR level, like in-depth stories. It's not just a retelling of something I read in the news. It's like I did some actual reporting. I got multiple people together. I recorded it really well. It sounds awesome. No one's stammering. The editing is like crisp. It's got nice sound beds. That was my taste. I wanted things to sound that way. I had no ability at the beginning, or even now, to make it sound that good. And what ends up happening is people go, well, I now have identified the reason I can never have my dream of being a professional podcaster is because I have not been gifted the team that Ira Glass has over at This American Life. I don't have the budget. I don't have the skill set. I don't have the qualifications. Thus, I guess I'll give up. And they never even tried. But my thinking now is like really, really drastically simplify what is your goal and what are you going to be happy with? And sometimes it's just like record yourself for 10 minutes talking about something that's important to you and then share it with a friend. It doesn't even have to be published. And let them give you some feedback and do another one and do another one. And then you'll learn enough. Then go work with like a launch partner, go work with a team and be like, hey, we've got some ideas now. So let's do this a little bit more professionally. Maybe there's no brand risk now, but you have to learn by doing.
Yeah. Yeah, there's so much truth to that. And I think, it is a balance because you want to make sure that you're going into it with the right expectations and even the right plan. But to your point, not when that becomes the thing that delays you. And now suddenly the microphone has been sitting on the shelf in your office closet for 2 years and you haven't done anything with it yet. But one day you're going to have that podcast. And so we have to balance this tension within us, I find, as experts, which it's this idea of, no, you're never going to have it all figured out. I've been doing this 5 years. I still don't have it all figured out. I can help you learn what to do and what not to do based on my experience and what I've learned to do and not to do. But also I've learned through the doing. And I want to pivot with you here a little bit because let's say, someone's listening right now and they are that person who's like, all right, I need to get in motion. I need to do something. I want to make this happen. And then maybe on the flip side of that, someone's listening and they're like, well, I've already done the thing. I've got it in motion, but it's not motioning. The motion is not happening. The growth that I expected is not happening. If we were to say, okay, we've got the next 90 days. What are the questions we need to be asking to get ourselves in motion with promoting that show and getting it out? Because the publishing is one thing. And, we can practice all day long and we can get those episodes out. You are going to get better as you go with that. Where I find a big gap happens, Alban, is where people don't know what to do next. How do we actually grow this thing and get it in front of new listeners who would find value in it?
Yeah. Well, the reason marketing advice, I think, is often pretty bad is because it is this one size fits all advice. And it's like, oh, you want to grow a business? Run advertisements. And like it misses what makes really good advertising work, which is a specific message targeted at a specific audience at the right time. And so let's get all those pieces together. Who is your podcast for? And get as specific as you can. It's not helpful for you to say, my podcast is actually for anybody, honestly. It could be for like guys in their 20s or women facing retirement, or even my grandmother could listen to, like when you have this really broad set of listeners, you don't know who it's for. So pick some group of people and you're like, oh, this is really for them. Then figure out, what are you giving them? What are they going to get excited that when they hear it, they go, that's for me. For sure, I'm going to go listen to that. So, if I was to say, oh, I've got a podcast and it's really good. It's about like, education. Everyone is trying to educate themselves about something. So it's kind of available for everyone. But if I focused it and I say it's actually for parents trying to decide what kind of school to send their kids to, or elementary age students and parents looking at homeschooling. And now I'm sharing my experiences being homeschooled and all my siblings being homeschooled. Now that sounds really focused. And the value is, one, parents looking at homeschooling will hear all of a sudden, oh, this might be for me because that's what I'm facing. And anybody else who hears about it, a person pops into their mind. They go, oh, my friend Jessica was just talking about this. I should send her the podcast. So let's get an audience first. So write down, who is that audience? Be specific. Number two, what is your audience going to get from your podcast? What specific thing? Is it that it's funny and it's really humorous? Then you've got to be really funny because you're competing with everyone else who's funny to them. Is it going to be that you're an expert in an area? Like, what's the specific hook? Is it a personal experience? Is it the interviews you're bringing in? What is the hook? And I work so much on the hook for video content, for podcast content, for anything we create. We will spend a long period. We'll know, I want to do a video about, we just did a video about podcast show notes. And the guy who was writing the script and I sat down for hours and we're like, what's the specific hook? Like, what is the thing in the first 10 seconds we can reliably promise and provides a real payoff for people we want to watch it? And once that was answered, the whole rest of the script wrote itself. Everything falls into place. So really think about who's the audience, what specific thing are you offering them? And now once you have those two, it becomes pretty obvious where are they and how do you get this thing in front of them? Because it should be so obvious now that once you get it in front of them, they go, yes, that's for me. I want it. And you don't have to do a hard sell because you've already done all the hard work. So whether it's QR codes at a bar that, mention your podcast, if the hook and everything else is done well, you'll know where to meet your audience. You'll know how to connect with them. And when you get in front of them, that will translate into podcast listeners.
Yes. Oh my gosh. Well, first of all, we could drop the mic right there because I'm always telling people, look, we could do whatever you want to do to grow your podcast. We could pour thousands of dollars into advertising, marketing, getting your show out there in front of new people in their feed. But unless you've got the attraction piece and the retention piece dialed in for your podcast and you know how to attract an audience, in other words, the hook that you're speaking of, what are we actually using to reach out and say, this is for you? And it's also not for you, the other yous out there that it's not for. And now how are we going to keep them listening? Then the marketing and growth efforts really will not pay off because you won't have clarity on what specifically you should be doing. Let me ask you this. So let's say someone has that clarity. They've got that hook. And let's say they have, I like to break things down in terms of time or money. Let's say someone has an extra hour a week to spend. Okay, they've got that clarity and it's like, all right, I need to go out and I need to get my podcast in front of someone new. What's like the lowest hanging fruit opportunities that someone might want to consider when it comes to, if I invest a little bit of time in doing this marketing for the show, that I'll see a payoff? And then the second question to that is, if I had $100 to spend and I could afford $100, maybe you could afford more, but let's say it's a small budget, where would you put that?
Well, let me preface this with, I have had some really big time budgets and really big money budgets at times, and I've completely blown them because I didn't get those first two pieces right. And so I'm not trying to dodge the question, but I don't want to give an answer without having a specific, let's pick a target audience and what our value statement is. Because if you get in front of the wrong people, even with the right value, then they're not going to convert at anything higher than 1 out of every 10,000. And even if you're in front of the right people, but you have the wrong hook, they're not going to convert at all. And so you're going to go, man, I heard if I did podcast guesting, that I'd get more listeners, but I did 50 guest interviews and I got 0 new listeners. Or I heard buying ads on other podcasts or buying ads in podcast apps led to listeners, but I just blew $1,000 and got nothing. Both of those are likely things to happen if we don't nail these first two. So we recently did a podcast episode where I had 25 people wrote in their show and what value they provided. And then I came up with unique marketing ideas. Also did this in a Reddit thread where people are writing, here's what my show's about, and we're doing the same. Somebody wrote in, he has a podcast called The Kids Code Podcast. His name is Barnabas, and he's like 12 years old, and he does a podcast about codes and like ciphers and code breaking. And he wants to get other kids excited about encryption and puzzles and games. And so I was like, okay, now that I've heard that, instantly ideas start shooting in my mind. And I was like, one of them is I want you to make a cipher, like where the A lines up with the X in the alphabet and you rotate the circle. And so you can change which letters connect. It's like, make a cipher and then make a code and have people break the code on that cipher. And then on the back say, hey, did you enjoy this puzzle? If so, listen to the Kids Code podcast and put a QR code to your show. And now I want you to distribute this to your target audience. Well, this target audience are kids pretty much in middle school who are into coding or they're into puzzles and games. So I was like, go to STEM programs, go to after school programs, go to library groups and hand out these ciphers. And they will not just go, okay, fine, because you paid us, we'll take it. They're going to ask for them because they actively want puzzles and games. And the kids actively want the puzzles and games you're making. And they actively want to listen to shows like this. And so he went from, well, will guesting on podcasts work? No, because none of the audience you were reaching were the right people, to knowing exactly, oh, I've got this marketing strategy and it's working beautifully for my show because I'm getting the right people at the right time and they're desperately excited about the content that I'm creating.
I love it. All right. So for someone listening right now who's like, I don't know if I'm really good and clear on what my messaging is and what my hook is for my show, what should their next step be walking away from this episode?
Think of a person, like who is a person that you know who should listen to your podcast, and describe why they're the right person. And then write, what do they want? And now that you know what they want, make sure your show's giving them that thing. And I think mostly the third piece, which is now the unique strategy, those almost always become pretty apparent. So you're like, we're watching The Bachelor and my target audience are women in this age demographic. And then you start coming up with like, okay, so I'm going to sponsor watch parties. Oh, there's actually a bunch of Facebook groups that do it. Okay, so I'm going to make bingo cards or drinking games for them to use while watching The Bachelor. And the backside of it is a promo for my podcast. Or I'm going to reach out to these Facebook groups and start interviewing the moderators so that they're excited to share the podcast with their group. As soon as you know target audience, real value they're getting, it becomes pretty easy to think of how to get in front of those people.
Well, it goes back to what you mentioned a moment ago about the hook in the videos and how the script really wrote itself once the hook became clear. So I'm super excited in the next episode to dive into video with you and to speak more to that. But also, I think this is a really important point, Alban, that I want people walking away from this episode, if you're listening right now, to really think about this. First, do the homework that we're talking about here. Let's make sure we have clarity, right, on the who and the what and the why. Not why is it important to you to podcast, but why would your listener care? Why would they want to listen compared to all the other podcasts that they could potentially listen to that may overlap with yours, that may compete with yours? And then from there, to think outside of the box. And this is why I think this conversation has been so refreshing, is because, yeah, there are a lot of things you could be doing. But like you said, when you have that clarity, it becomes a lot easier to figure out, okay, this is the next step that I should take for my show, and to recognize that's not going to look the same for everybody.
Exactly.
Yeah. Awesome. Alban, thanks for being here today.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
And if you found this episode helpful, I would love it if you would take 5 seconds, scroll down in your Apple app or your Spotify app or wherever you listen to podcasts, tap the 5 stars, rate the show if you get value out of the show, and bonus points when you leave a written review on Apple, letting other listeners know, hey, you're going to get value out of this too. And then don't go anywhere, because I threw out my questions for the next episode when Alban said he wanted to talk about the dark side of video podcasting. And I promise you, this is a conversation you do not want to miss, because everyone right now is saying, oh, you need to do video if you want your podcast to grow, but is it all it's hyped up to be? Or is there a deeper reason why so many of today's top podcasts, when you actually look at the numbers, are skipping video altogether? And in the next episode, Alban's pulling back the curtain on the actual data and the hidden downsides of video podcasting that nobody's really talking about, and why this actually might be good news for you. That's all coming up next to help you make your business binge-worthy.